Welcome to another Vendor Ops Strategic Thinking series. Today I'm going to be talking to you about 9 potential opportunities that exist within your supply management function today that you need to jump on.
Vendor Ops, leveling up your vendor management.
Cross-functional teams is the first one, so no one's got enough resources. None of the teams involved within the either pre-contract or post-contract negotiation has got enough resources. The only way to get enough manpower is to pull that together. But if you pull that together, you need to basically define who's doing what and what part of the process within the life cycle. So really recommend doing a RACI model or something similar. RACI, responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. Who's doing what, who's leading on what part of the process, who's negotiating, who's operationalising the contract, who's then executing against the contract, being very clear on that to ensure that there's no gaps in that operating model. Absolutely a critical must between organisations, departments and teams where processes cross those boundaries. Number 2, Centre of Excellence. So once you've established that RACI model, again, back to the resource concerns or the resource constraints, you commonly need to have a Centre of Excellence. Who knows what goods looks like? Sometimes within a technical sense or a business sense, it's called an architect. So who do you refer to about all parts of the process when it comes together to represent the function around contract management and contract performance, etc.? There needs to be a Centre of Excellence to design those standards and best practice. Look at the team dynamics, look at what reusable components there are, templates, etc. to make things quicker, what the standard KPIs are, what does monitored mean, and continuously improving them, but also make sure it's lightweight enough so it doesn't pull down all the parts of the process and make it suboptimal or underperforming. So that's the second one, establish a centre of excellence. Number 3, policies and procedures. I just touched on this, but you need to write down the policies and procedures. So the policies from what do you need to do from a regulatory perspective? What does the regulator expect you if there is? Or if there isn't an external regulator, what do the internal leadership team and business units expect of you? So that's like internal regulation. What standards are there? Supplier code of conduct, etc. that need to be complied with. And then what procedures and processes there are that underpin that. So document those procedures in a lightweight fashion. Look at the processes that underpin the procedures. Who does what, back to the RACI model, who's expected to run with what. By writing it down, you'll find out whether they are understood well, how to communicate them, and then push them out across that RACI model that was defined as part of step 1. Step 4, where possible, from the back of documenting your processes, try and digitise them, to try and get them in some kind of workflow that helps sort of augmented intelligence, gives you an ability to help the people on the journey because the workflow is digitised as such so they know the steps that they need to go through. Once you've documented it, you can look at how you can automate it, modernise that for the digital age. And then once you've got it automated to a degree, you can then look at how you optimise it within the technology of choice and the tools landscape that you've got, and even to the point of applying some kind of AI or machine learning that can help automate some more of the mundane tasks where possible. Step 5, integrated data repositories. No one system does it all, right? There's always across the larger the organisation, and when you're dealing with suppliers or customers, depending which side of the table you're on, you've got a need to integrate data. So make sure that whatever you've got from a tooling landscape plays nicely with other products, and that you look at all the disparate data repositories you've got around. Some might hold contracts, some might hold performance, some might hold risk, many more examples, some might hold sustainability data, etc. Try and bring them together, or at least have some kind of concept of warehouse, data warehouse, central repository, data lake. There's lots of words for it been used in the past decade, but bring them together so you've got a single pane of glass. By putting those data repositories next to each other, you'll start to draw a lot deeper insight, and then thus what's the next best action to take on specific deals or across the supplier landscape, etc. Step 6, establish controls. So controls can come in all different shapes and sizes. Something you can see on the screen here is they're either directive or preventative or detective or corrective. The preventive ones are always the best or preferred controls. What things can be put in place to prevent a issue from happening on those controls. And also then from a corrective perspective, if something does go a bit awry, what are the corrective controls that can be established? There's lots of control frameworks out there. Some of the common ones in technology landscape is COBIT 5, ITIL has some, you've got some in the regulatory industry and finance, Sarbanes-Oxley and the SOX framework have got a set of controls in. But essentially, they are the guide rails for all your processes to ensure that no untoward risk happens if your controls are optimal and performing as expected. If you still have something happen that was undesired and your controls weren't flagging red or amber, it's likely that you've got a missing control, or you need to establish another control in the future to ensure that doesn't doesn't happen again. But number 6, establishing controls, absolutely a requirement. Doesn't have to be hundreds or thousands, can be tens across the process stack to ensure that contracts are being managed in a compliant and performant manner. Number 7, tracking performance. So once you've established the controls, you need to track performance. So that comes up in all different types of acronyms, from SLAs and OLAs in a contract to internal KPIs, so key performance indicators, and even as such as sometimes key risk indicators, KRIs, and key control indicators, KCIs. Ultimately, all these things need to be tracked. Back to the earlier point, the more digitized your processes are, the more likely you'll be able to report on these data archetypes and see whether they're performing well or not, overdue, scoring badly, etc. Without some kind of digital mechanism, it will be a lot of paperwork and a lot of mandrolic activity to be able to track that. But key that you track performance, whatever that means to you and your organisation, against contract, etc. Number 8, risk culture. So you can't just have an acceptance that within an organisation the risk managers are responsible for risk. Risk managers are typically what they call a second line function, so they're further back in the business, they're away from the coalface. Risk culture needs to be brought out in and across the organisation to ensure that the tone from the top is correct, that you've got a right level of risk leadership, that they're good at dealing with bad news and responding to that in a positive and constructive manner, that the decisions that are taken off the back of that are informed, that there's the correct level of governance, accountability, transparency, and that there's the right competency there. So does the front line, the people that deal with suppliers and contracts on a day-to-day basis, understand risk and how risk should manifest itself, when to create a risk, when not to create a risk? And a repeat process, like a risk assessment process or part of due diligence or inherent risk process, are those processes available in the front line to inform what is a risk and what isn't, and what should be treated as one and not? And that comes into that competency and those risk skills. If that's not there, that's something that needs to be there to improve the inner workings of a team managing a contract, to be able to spot that early before it crystallises and avoid any of those problems from actually happening. Number 9 and final one, not only do you need to establish what your current state is, so your current state in your operation of how supplier management is done or vendor management is done today, you need to look at it on the basis of how would I do it tomorrow? And it's always ideal to track against a defined maturity model. The picture you can see here is a CMMI example. It's well known across a lot of industries. What is the one that you want to use for your vendor and supplier management function? So that means going from a low level of maturity to a high level of maturity, and apply this at the functional level, but at the process level as well, and the granular elements of that. Not everyone wants to get to 5. Recommendation is, if your business is about what this maturity model represents, you might want to get to 5, but most organisations are happy to get to a 3, sort of 3+ model on an average basis. There are lots of maturity models out there. The vendor ops community has one if you care to look at that, but there's also other SRM functions, vendor management that can apply, or you can build your own using what you can see on screen. So that's the 9th one, defined maturity model. I hope that was helpful. There were 9 things, the potential opportunities that exist within your organisation today that you can look at improving on an iterative basis with no other need to increase resources or spend as such. You just got to spend a little bit of time doing it. And I promise you will get the return on investment and rewards out of it. If you like this and any other videos that you've seen, please head over to either LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube or Spotify. On Spotify, we're under a podcast called The Bridge, and follow the channels and you'll start getting all this stuff delivered to your inbox and your social feeds for free. Any feedback you have, any comments, happy to receive them. Until next time, thank you and bye-bye.
Vendor Ops, leveling up your vendor management.